Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast. On today's show, I'm pleased to have Travis Ingram. He's the Senior VP of Dealer IT, and my good friend, David Metter, who's currently working as an advisor to Dealer IT. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good morning.
So this conversation is going to be one of the most personal and meaningful to me because I come from an IT background. The conversation we're going to have today applies to the vendor community who's trying to sell technology to dealers, and it applies to every single dealership in the US, even around the world. So those of you who are listening to the podcast, I want you to lean in for a unique opportunity to transform your dealership operations. Travis, let me start with you. The company was founded in 2011. If a dealer isn't familiar with who Dealer IT is and you're riding up the elevator, what's that pitch that would summarize the vision and opportunity for a dealer to do business with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So the elevator pitch I would give any dealership that I speak with is, technology affects every aspect of the car business today. Everything from the service departments to finance offices to customers' experiences. Technology plays a fundamental role and is only growing every single day, and you have to invest in your future to be successful in this business.
Well, Travis, one of the interesting points that I want to talk about is really something everyone can identify with is COVID brought video conferencing, Zoom meetings, and everyone now kind of expects a conversation to be happening, with a video element. But you did a nationwide speed survey, and I want you to share what you found, but I think everyone has been frustrated with a meeting when somebody's in and out or fuzzy or audio is garbled. And imagine that happening on a regular basis. I mean, I would jump off of a bridge if that was my job to be in Zoom meetings with people with poor internet speeds. Travis, what did you find out from your dealer survey?
Yeah, absolutely. So we were running into technology problems helping out dealership as a consultant for the past 20 years. And so the COVID introduced a new world of challenges for them. And as we were running into these network setup problems and connectivity problems that you're alluding to, we decided to do a study, 1,100 dealerships, and the results were pretty astonishing. We found out that, the pain point most dealerships complain about is I want more speed or I can't download something fast enough. And what we found out was that most times it's really just the network that they have in the buildings that is the problem. And so they keep trying to buy more bandwidth or go to their tight IT guy and say, fix my connectivity. They have fundamental network management problems, and that's where we had to start looking at the issue and educating them.
Well, I will tell you a funny story. When we ran the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference in June, we forced all the dealers who were going to be on panels to do tests. And I will tell you, two of the largest dealers in the United States with amazing profitability had the crappiest internet connection. So bad, one dealer had to use their phone to jump into the Skype call, which I hated because then now someone's holding a phone and, it's bouncing around. David, you have built companies, you've worked in large dealer groups. Why pick Dealer IT to align your expertise? Why now with this company?
Well, I think that Dealer IT is uniquely qualified to not only identify the things that we found in the speed test. And an example of that is of 1,100 plus dealerships, only 6 of them at any given time during multiple days of testing, multiple times of testing, only 6 of them had speeds of over 100 megabits. That's scary. And by the way, I completely agree with you. Within those 1,100 dealerships, there's a lot of large dealer groups where you would think that they wouldn't have these issues, and they certainly did. I think the dealer IT opportunity of being able to run a test like this, but most importantly, to be able to go and help fix these issues, whether it is true bandwidth coming into the building or the network connectivity within the four walls. I think dealer IT has a really great opportunity to help dealers and actually help a lot of the vendors to get blamed for some of these issues, and it doesn't really fall on their plate.
Well, for everyone in the vendor community, and I know a lot of our peers listen to the podcast, for OEMs who listen to the podcast, let me throw this out. I'm not going to hold it to the end. Dealer IT will come to any dealership to do a free assessment. It takes about a half hour. Someone coming into the dealership and testing the network. Now, to me, I was expecting pre-call that Travis was going to say, yeah, we'll do a free assessment remotely. But when he said free and someone comes on site, I'm like, wow, that's a bold offer for this podcast. And what I know about technology, it comes from my roots and foundations. I had my own computer consulting business. I built networks. I worked for 3 years at Goldman Sachs in the IT department, building networks and data management and news service feeds. There's a lot of complexity, but Travis, recently, in relatively recent times, the gigabyte Ethernet speed came out. I know the old hubs, those connection hubs, were limited to, I'm dating myself. You had 10 megabit per second, and then 100 megabit per second was like amazing. But now people could bring a gigabyte service into the building, but if all their wiring hubs are 100 megabit hubs, right? They're not getting the throughput that they really think that they should get, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And you're not really dating yourself, because the funny story is that most dealerships I get brought into as a consultant still have those 10 megabit switches and hubs and that old equipment that they've never upgraded. It's really the philosophy that it isn't necessarily broken, so why fix it? But the problem is they're dealing with the symptoms and they're never really looking at the root problem. So the cabling is outdated, unfortunately. The equipment is aged and outdated, and just the nature of things connecting between each other. You may think you have a cabling or a networking problem, but your phone is connected through those computers and everything becomes a bottleneck. You have to look at holistically the entire network and how everything's connected together.
You bring up a great point. Most dealers, and maybe the people who work at dealerships today, forget that, the phone systems today, for the most part, are voice over IP. We remember the early days in technology when it was like, oh, are you going to switch to voice over IP? And they're like, no, I don't trust that. Today, the phones effectively are running over the internet, but we have a huge shift in the use of mobile devices, video technology, video walkarounds. I mean, one of the things that we learned during COVID was remote retailing or digital retailing was really benefited by leveraging like a Microsoft Teams or a Zoom meeting, even Skype, screen sharing, doing a needs analysis or an F&I presentation face-to-face. And this really worked, but I heard so many stories that their infrastructure would constantly break down. Travis, how does an IT investment impact selling and servicing cars? I mean, we need to get to the bottom that old IT infrastructure is costing them more than they know. How do you explain it to dealers?
Yeah, so most dealerships treat IT as the plumber. It's kind of the old joke. We call IT when there's a problem. What we really need to do is make a concerted effort to educate our dealerships that you have to invest in your infrastructure, you have to invest in your technology, and have a great foundation for all of these great technologies that are available in the automotive industry. All the hundreds of vendors that I work with on a daily basis, the majority of our conversations are about how do I make their platform work inside my dealerships. And so ultimately, it's not their responsibility or their accountability of the problems they need to solve. They're just getting the phone call about their services and their products not working. 9 times out of 10, it comes down to a security or an antiquated equipment or capacity issue with connectivity. It always comes down to how well is your foundation in your dealership. And when you don't have those set you up for success, you have all the symptoms that we run into every day: connectivity problems, glitchy networks, customers complaining about wireless speeds when they're in your lounge, your service departments can't program cars. How long does it take to do an F&I deal in 4 hours for a customer waiting or a 2-hour oil change? You start dealing with all those symptoms and those pain points, you really start looking at the fundamental problem that's causing all of them.
David, you were involved with this survey, and I have a question just from a technology standpoint. You mentioned that you tested 1,100 dealers. Their networks weren't sufficient to handle the traffic needs. Was this hardwired testing? Was this wireless testing? Because here's what I know, even with my gigabyte service now in Florida, hardwired, I can get about 900 megabits down, maybe 100 up. But if I go wireless, that can be cut in half or a third. What was this survey based on? Hardwire, wireless combination? What was it about?
Sadly, it was all wired. So you can't come up with the objection of, well, my wireless network is being taxed by X. These were all hardwired connections within the 1,100 plus dealerships.
Boy, that is super disappointing. Although I will tell you that it is not uncommon when I'm on the road. Now, I haven't been on the road for 8 months, but back in the day when people traveled on planes, I would, be in a dealership's conference room and we wanted to download something, maybe it was a big video file or something, and it was taking forever. And I'd say, well, can we just go to the hard wire? And they'd say, sure, here's a wire. And it really wasn't much better. Travis, I want to talk to you about digital retailing and just menu-driven service. Everyone's adding tablets to the showroom. I'm hearing more and more, hey, every salesperson has a tablet. Everyone's going off this menu-based system, whether it is, a product like a Roadster or a Prodigy, whether it's multi-point inspection product, everyone's using tablets. This has to put a tremendous strain and possibly even a security vulnerability. What do you have to say to dealers who are just adding 20 or 30 laptops or 20 or 30 tablets and not thinking about their wireless infrastructure?
Yeah, unfortunately, they don't realize the additional pains they're about to add to their operation. They think they're getting flexibility or additional capabilities by going wireless, and most of them just haven't figured out that they can't do that yet. When the dealerships were traditionally built, last 10 years, they have focused on the customer lounge wireless. I need to make the customer where they can get on their guest wireless. It really wasn't a priority to think about my sales department, my service departments, finance offices, the service technicians having wireless capabilities. It just wasn't a thought back then. And so now they're having to scramble, and they're winging it. They're going to their local Best Buy and just adding the access points that they go to their house and buy and just keep adding them to the network. And unfortunately, those aren't built for capacity. As you alluded to earlier, security, they're not the best practices for an enterprise. And they don't really have the capabilities and features that you'd want in an enterprise. Something as simple as, being able to walk between the service department, sales office, and your customer lounge, because wireless can roam between access points. They don't have that capability. So they find that they're managing 10 or 15 different Wi-Fi names they're connecting to and different passwords. It just becomes a lot more complex, and it doesn't have to be. It actually can be a huge benefit. It doesn't have to be so complex.
Travis, as I hear that, thinking of a phrase that we used to use in the early days of voice over IP, which was building a managed network, meaning you had quality of service guidelines where maybe this server was the high priority, so it was guaranteed a certain amount of the bandwidth. This is when obviously we only had 10 base T or 10 megabit networks, but managed networks apply more today than ever, especially since there are critical functions for the dealership or dealer group, especially if they're running their own private network, and then network requests like, the customer lounge. How do you explain that a dealer who just goes out to Best Buy, buys a couple more routers, buys a couple more repeaters, is really not doing the right thing because the long-term sustainability is implementing a managed network service?
Yeah, so I like to use analogies of traffic patterns a lot of times when I discuss networking and internet. So a good one is basically like traffic lights and stop signs. If you don't have those fundamental controls in place, you can't control the traffic, you can't control who's on that network, you can't stop the things that are eating up all of your available bandwidth. So having those enterprise level access points, or really a technology partner who understands them and implements them for your priorities. You can't stop the kid in the lounge on Netflix eating up all your bandwidth, and you can't log into your CRM or DMSs, or it's shutting down all the different menu systems that you've added in finance. They don't even have visibility to know what's causing all those problems, much less, the pain that they're dealing with. They just start scrambling.
David, you worked in a large dealer group. You built businesses to serve some of the largest dealer groups in the United States. And your test shows that this has been a neglected area of investment. For dealer principals, general managers listening to this podcast, what message do you have to them, since likely they've not made the investment and likely they haven't been aware of the impact? So they're going to look at this as a cost. And right now, even though dealers are probably making maximum profit, spending money never is easy, especially if they've never done it before. What do you have to say to those dealer principals, general managers, about the urgency of getting this free assessment?
Yeah, it's funny you say the word cost, because that's where it usually falls within every single dealership conversation. And that typically means that it falls on the plate of the CFO or the VP of accounting. And we took a very unique approach at the dealer group where I was an executive leader. I actually partnered with our CFO as it related to any changes or additions in the way that we built our network infrastructure at our dealerships and connecting all of our dealerships, because we were smart enough to think of it as a revenue generator instead of just a true cost entity. And so, and I think that went back to even my days. I was fortunate to be a general manager at a very young age, and we were building a new dealership. And at the time, we put one of the first ISDN lines, which that completely dates me, but into our dealership. We looked at it again, not as a cost saver or just a true cost, but really a revenue generator, knowing that the future of our dealership profits were tied directly to our efficiencies. And I think the last thing I would say to this, Brian, is if you don't even believe anything I just said, think about your own employees and their frustration levels. There's nothing more frustrating as a salesperson to not be able to do your job when you're trying to follow processes in the dealership. Like, I'm supposed to do things in the CRM, but then when I can't because it's bogged down, I want to skip the process. Or if there are certain processes in the way that we check vehicles in, or we shoot videos of video, or any of those things that we want to do because the dealership requires us to do them, but then we can't do them, it frustrates employees to no end. And if for no other reason, do it for that, to empower your people to do what you're asking them to do so that they can sell and service more cars.
Well, I'm also going to just repeat, listen, at the upcoming Automotive Analytics and Attribution Summit, which Dealer IT is participating and has an amazing workshop. So we'll get to that. But one of the hot topics is remote retailing. We're having a digital retailing face-off. We're going to have the best of the best talking about ways in which you can serve customers more efficiently, sell more cars per salesperson more efficiently. But it really rides on video, remote tech, and strong internet speeds. And for the digital retailing companies listening to today's podcast, listen carefully. You should be setting up a partnership with Dealer IT. When you go into a dealer and you open your mouth, it's like, yeah, you should get tablets for everybody. If you hear that coming out of your mouth, you should also say, but before you do that, why don't you get a free assessment? I mean, I can't imagine all the service lane technology that's being put, service techs with using their iPhones to show videos of car parts or conditions and pushing all this stuff out. If you're in the vendor community, this is an amazing opportunity. I thought it would cost something myself. I would be like, yeah, $1,000 or something. A dealer would do that if they really could get the right advice. But this is a system problem. It affects the dealers, it affects the customers, and it affects the vendor community. So Travis, let's try to put a bow on this conversation. If there were three things, a good Sunday pastor, Dave and I will, tell you a good pastor's message is always 3 points. If you had three must-dos for dealers, what would they be?
I would say that they obviously need to invest in the future of their business and the success of their technology. That's the biggest impact they can have to their operation is their technology platform. After that, I would evolve. They're buying new dealerships. They're expanding the service departments. They're taking on new technologies. They need to evolve. They need to evolve the business, not just their processes and systems that they're using. And the biggest thing they can make is education. They invest in their employees' education on their vehicles, and they drive it home every single month in the get-togethers. They need to educate their staff about the technology that the business is currently using, what technology they'd like to see, and understand that every day that it can be really a beneficial component to their operation. It doesn't have to be this technology platform that they don't like or think they don't understand. They really need to educate their staff on how to use the technology that they've invested in.
That's really helpful. Now, Travis, there's two things that we want to make sure our listeners can do. Number one is they can go to your website, which is Dealer IT, like for information technology, dealeritgroup.com, and they can do a free speed test themselves, and they can sign up for the free assessment. When someone does a speed test, what are they looking for? What would you want, say, a sales associate or general manager who's sitting at their desk right now? They're going to type this in, dealeritgroup.com. And if you're driving, listening to podcasts, please don't do this while driving. Travis, what would you want them to see?
Yeah, so if they go to our website, at the top right corner, there's a green button that says Network Speed Test. Simply click on that button when you're at your dealership and click on the Go button. It'll do a free speed test. There's no passwords. There's no security. You're not seeing us any information. Just do an assessment. If it comes in that your download speeds are under 100 meg or your upload speeds are under 50 meg, you probably want to have a conversation with us and let us take a look at it and see how we can help you. There's a simple form to the right to fill out. As Brian alluded to, it's a free assessment. We'll schedule someone to come into your building and talk to you. And it's, there's no obligation to do any business with us. We just want to be an opportunity for you for a solution provider.
Well, that sounds like a no-brainer, especially since as I moved into my new home in Boca and had it wired, I mean, I've been doing all sorts of testing, and it's not so straightforward. I've actually had a router, a Netgear router, where the wireless signal was fast, but the ports were turned down. And of course, that is a huge problem. There's also weird things that happen. I also want to challenge everyone who's listening with a special offer from Dealer IT because they are a sponsor. And that is for the first 20 dealers that go to their website, dealeritgroup.com, and request an assessment. Dealer IT is going to give you a pass, which is worth $395 for the upcoming Automotive Analytics and Attribution Summit. So you get a free assessment. Someone come to your dealership, test your network speeds, and the first 20 dealers who fill out that form will get a ticket to the AAA Summit. Here's what you have to do. You have to recognize that you heard this offer through the podcast. It's just not from people filling out the form. They have people doing that all the time. So fill out the form and then send Travis a note that says, Travis, I heard your podcast. I'd like a free assessment, and I'd like to take advantage of the free ticket to the Automotive Analytics and Attribution Summit. So Travis, they're going to need your email address. What's the best email address for them to use so they can get the free assessment and a free ticket?
Yeah, absolutely. So my email address is travis@dealeritgroup.com.
Man, you made that too easy. I thought you were going to do, some travis.ingram.coolguy@, no. So very, very, very simple. David, you and Travis are going to be doing a workshop to really spend a little bit more time with dealers on the financial impact, the strategy for better technology. Give me a little teaser. Why should dealers attend AAS and participate in your workshop?
I think that they'll get a true view of how a mismanaged or undermanaged network can affect their everyday workload. I think OEMs will think harder about this and really focus their conversations down to their dealers to make sure that they have a digital readiness strategy. And then the one that I'm probably the most excited about, I think this really can open up the eyes of vendors where they can align with a good partner or even help identify shortcomings within some of their dealer customers. And it's not about shifting blame, it's about getting the right things in place so that they can optimize the true value at their vendor partner level with the dealers. So those are the three.
Great. I love that. Well, if you are not registered for the Automotive Analytics and Attribution Summit, you should know that it's a 3-day virtual event. We have over 40 workshops, keynotes, panel discussions. All of the content will allow you to rewatch and share for 30 days after the conference. We are innovating virtual conferences by allowing you to call in and ask questions of the speakers. We have interactive contests, interactive exhibit hall. This is online education to the next level. I've been telling people with your ticket to the AAA Summit, it's like getting a master class in automotive retail for one low ticket price, and the content will be covering marketing, attribution, digital retailing, technology, social media, even logistics, all of the modern conversations that dealers need to take their dealership to the next level. And since we know that this is a busy time of the year, you can attend the sessions that you need to and then watch it over the next 30 days. So we are really excited about the conference. And don't forget, if you go to dealeritgroup.com and request an on-site assessment for free, do that today. And then send travis@dealeritgroup.com a reminder. I'd like to get a free ticket to the AAA Summit. I hope that you act quickly because it will be for the first 20 dealers who respond. If this is the first time you're listening to podcasts, you should know that every week I publish a new interview with industry leaders in the attempt to help better automotive retail. This is part of a series, The Road to the AAA Summit. And so we're accelerating. Every 3 or 4 days, we're releasing a new podcast so you get to know the speakers, the companies, and the excitement that we all have for the upcoming AAA Summit, November 16th, 17th, and 18th. Well, we thank you for listening. We hope that you'll take seriously our challenge to have your network looked into, get an assessment, a path forward so that you can stay relevant to sell more cars in a digital age. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and for all our dealers and industry folks who are watching and listening today. Well, we'll catch you again on an upcoming podcast.